Welcome to the Post-Traumatic Enlightenment Summit, an interview series to help you move past trauma and learn to redefine yourself to build an inspiring life. I'm your host, Jennifer Cunningham. One of the ideas behind this series is to highlight a broad array of programs, courses, books, podcasts, and people that will help you or someone that you love who has experienced trauma to move on, grow, and create a more abundant and happy life. Our guest today is SarahJaneFarrell, who, among other things, is a pragmatic psychologist and an expert on how to heal from unresolved trauma by resetting your nervous system. Welcome, Sarah Jane.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for putting on this amazing platform for people to know that there's hope.
Good. Yeah, thank you. So why don't we start, if you could just tell us about yourself and your professional background.
Sure. Gosh, it's a long story, but I'll try and keep it quick and tight. I basically grew up in Zimbabwe like any old normal child, but it was during a bush war, and I suppose you don't know what normal is unless you are out of what you know is normal. So for me, that was just normal. Life was about warring. Life was struggle. A lot of my friends, my parents' friends, my family were farmers, and it was a very disempowering time because they got their farms taken away. There was a lot of trauma, and yet you manned up. In those days, you didn't go into, there was something to be depressed about. You just had to get on with it. So the first sort of 4 decades of my life were really about that chronic, unpredictable, toxic stress of not knowing one day to the next what was going to happen. But everyone was going through it. So it was kind of like, well, that's normal. Right. I didn't know then what I know now, that my nervous system was stuck on all the time. It was always looking for safety. It was always treading on eggshells. My father was second generation alcoholic, and probably a lot of that had to do with unresolved PTSD from being in the army and the war, and so the whole dynamic of family stuff. And then I was always the one that was in the family. I've got 3 sisters. I was always the one that was labeled, the crazy one, the woo one, the one that's too sensitive. And I never fitted. So there was a lot of dynamic that was going on that sort of brought me to a place where at 16, I tried to kill myself. I always just had these frequent bouts of depression, and it went on for decades. And I know you've been through your own health and healing crises, and you know that living with that depression, which is a side effect of what's actually at the root cause of all of this, was really like having an invisible disability, because it affects every aspect of your life. And it's what, the silent scream of that hidden wound is that nobody else can feel it or taste it or touch it, but you're living with that all the time, and you don't know how to overcome it because you don't have the tools. So that's kind of was sort of the segue into not knowing that 4 decades later I would be working in this field. I lived a completely different life up until then, overachieving, always very competitive, having to be number one. My dad used to say, if you're not number one, you're nothing. So there was a lot around distrust. Where could I trust? Where was I going to go? And, you do the best with what you can. So I had what looked like a pretty successful life on the outside. I created companies from nothing. I've always been an entrepreneur and a leader, but it kind of all came crashing down, when the body eventually says no. Yeah. And at 35, I'd married my business partner, who was a classic narcissist. He'd been in the war. He had PTSD, and I didn't know him other than after that anyway. Right. So I had narcissistic abuse going on. I had so much going on. And he said to me, the only way you're getting out of this marriage and this business is dead or with nothing. Wow. So that was sort of the turning point for me at 35, was trying to take my own life again, because I couldn't see a way out of the shame of losing my business and going into bankruptcy and the trauma of all of that. And it was really sitting in a mental institution, government mental institution at 35 is a good place to hide. Wow. Being a medical mystery to everybody, because they didn't know what was wrong with me, gave me all sorts of labels like bipolar and everything else. And eventually sort of getting to the point where I had to choose to live. And then they found out that I had 2 brain tumors in the back of my occipital lobe that were causing a lot of the symptoms that looked like bipolar and anxiety and depression and everything else.
Wow.
So I wasn't prepared to die. And that was, like I said, the turning point that sort of brought me into this work of going, okay, what are the alternatives to a Western Cartesian approach of drugging a person out on SSRIs and walking around like a zombie? And hence my sort of devouring every alternative healing modality that I could get my hands on, from traditional Chinese medicine to acupuncture to body talk. I did it all. And that's where I've sort of come now, 17 years after all of that, where I am able to support other people that are feeling the same way that I did, that there is another way through trauma.
That's amazing. Wow, that is quite the story. And certainly
it's a big story,
so much life experience to be able to help a lot of people. So that's...
Yeah, I think that's what I think automatically we're called. I love that quote that Michael Beckwith says, that God doesn't call on the qualified, he qualifies the called. And we sometimes have to go kicking and screaming around all the PhD of life experiences that we've done out there in the field of life to get to, oh my gosh, if I'm feeling like this, how many other people out there could benefit from my experience, and being able to tell that story from a place of inspiration rather than victimology. So,
yeah, I love that. I love that. So I was reading one of your blog posts, and you talk about creating space to heal. And you use this beautiful quote that discomfort is the call to set yourself free. Can you expand on that concept? I loved that.
Yeah, I can't even believe I said that. But anyway, yeah, it is. It's just like, I like to call that place sort of the waiting room. And if you've done any of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work on the 5 stages of grief, I feel like there's a place that I was in where it's like your old life doesn't exist anymore, and you don't know what the future holds, and you're sort of in this luminal space of the waiting room. Yeah. Because grief takes as long as it takes, and it doesn't happen all at once and then you're okay. So yeah, it's just like, I think that we need to sit with pain, and we don't know how to be with pain. In Western culture, we're medicalized. We medicalize a natural process of grieving, of sitting with your pain as a pathway to healing. That is so valuable. And yet we're taught that and rewarded to bypass that, either spiritually or emotionally or mentally. And I think that there's a deep honoring of staying there. In ancient cultures, if you listen to the depression, for example, if you go what I call the deep down, there's a gift there. And Native American tribes, I can't remember which one it says, but basically that says that when you get depressed, you're out in the wilderness alone to speak to that and find your vision, because it's telling you to connect with your soul. Right. We all need a purpose. We all want to think that we matter. And we need to find out what's going on there. And that for me is valuable, because it's saying, what else is possible? What if I don't numb myself out? What if I could just sit with this pain and have a conversation? Right. What could I learn? What could I learn from that place?
Yeah, that's very powerful. It's it's not easy, right? It's not easy to sit with that.
No. And I suppose that's the practice. That's the mystery of life is that we're constantly in training to go, okay, if I can be truthfully honest with myself about what I'm starting to feel again, because I've been so numbed out, or I've been told, okay, enough now, snap out of it, which is what so many people going through depression. I'm not talking about clinical depression, but I'm talking about that space of grieving, or when you're constantly listening to these inner saboteur voices that are saying you're not enough. Who do you think you are to be doing this? But when you can get to that root of that subconscious pattern that's holding that in place and identify it, when you name it, then transformation can happen, and then the clearing can happen. And I think that's the beautiful thing. The body does follow the mind.
Yeah.
So we're literally spelling with our words, with our thoughts, with our emotions, everything that we don't want into being, rather than looking at, okay, how can I see my life through the lens of resilience, of all the things that I actually have survived. And
Right.
and a lot of that is I've learned through my own healing with adverse childhood experiences, which was the ACE test that we're going to send people through, that I didn't even know that there were all these things that were running my life from the subconscious.
Wow.
As an adult, right? The child parts were running the show, the child parts that were fragmented, because when we go through trauma, and we're not talking about big events like divorce or incarceration or death of a family member, or some of those big ones that they talk about in the ACE study, but more the chronic, unpredictable, toxic stress that runs daily. It's not knowing whether we're safe or not.
Yeah.
Not knowing if we can trust other people. Not knowing whether we can trust ourselves. And that's why I love root cause resolution, and why in my work I really want to get down to the root of, when did you create this, the thought, the seed, when did you plant the seed that's created, and oftentimes 20, 30 years later. That's the ACE study, which is when I had my breakdown or whatever at 35, I realized that was an accumulation of all these years of unresolved toxic stress and trauma pre 7-year-old.
Wow. And then that all layers on each other, right? So then you've got these layers of trauma. And then you may experience, like you said, a big trauma, but you haven't even resolved some of these others. So your coping skills and the lens which you're looking through your life is impacted by some of these childhood traumas.
Yeah. And that's why we don't know that is what it is, unless we get support or we actually go into some of the shadow work, because it's so deeply buried in your psyche, and yet your body holds on to the trauma on a cellular level. So for me, trauma is never in the event. The event is just the catalyst. It's like saying, I'm the gun and the environment is the trigger.
Right.
It's like you're literally a ticking time bomb if you don't actually start looking at the consequences of how this toxic stress is damaging a developing brain. And we were all children at some point.
Right. Wow.
And I suppose the good news is that the research that they've done on resilience is showing our brains are very plastic. This is the neuroplasty.
Yeah.
So we can change our bodies. We can give them a chance. But we have to be really honest with the parts and hold the parts that are frightened. Because we know it up here, but we don't know it in here.
Right. And we may not know how to do that. So that's some of the work that you do, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a pivot. So this low energy is a kind of often a problem with people who are processing trauma or a traumatic event. And you talk about that in your programs. What are some of the ways that you work with clients to address just that, in order for them to have enough energy to then dig deep into some of these other issues?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question, because I know what it feels like to sit in that waiting room when you're like going, why bother? I'm so exhausted. I can't even get out of bed every day. And I think for me, it's about going 1 degree, doing a 1 degree shift at a time, and looking at, okay, what is the change that I want to focus on? How do I take responsibility for what's happening in my own mind and in my own body, in my part in the relationships that are playing out with disease, internally or externally, and seeing where I'm holding on to the story rather than looking at what is happening in the present moment. So some of the ways that I work with my clients is to really, it's an individual prescription, because we want to meet the voice that's exhausted, the one that's given up, the one that doesn't see that there's a way out, where it's at. So I like to ask questions rather than going to the conclusion of answers. because questions always sort of open us up to what is possible in this moment, and to stay in our bodies viscerally. So one of the first things that I take people through is some really simple, pragmatic ways of knowing that when that old trigger or fear comes up, to speak to the part at the age that it is. Ooh. That feels that way.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because you as the adult, I mean, does it make sense that you the adult, cognitively, you know, this is where we go into self-judgment, and we go into holding on to these old stories that we can't change things, because we're going, yes, I know all of that, so why can't I change it?
Right.
And what I've found in all the people that I've worked with and working on my own health and my own body is that it's because we're not speaking to the suppressed consciousness of the part that experienced the trauma at the age that they were when it happened. So we actually have to grow ourselves up.
Wow.
We need to take on that role of the secure attachment of the maternal and paternal figures that perhaps weren't there for us at that age when we were feeling afraid of them. Wow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to me, depression you can also look at as deep rest. Right? We need, instead of seeing it as a wrongness, it's like looking at, okay, what does this part need? What does this part need that is so exhausted that they can't get out of bed in the morning? Right. Well, start by speaking to the part, staying in your body, because a lot of people that have been traumatized, especially sexual abuse, we learn very early on as children that when we can't fight and we can't flee, we go into this freeze response. And all that stress does is it creates inflammation in the brain, which is the exhaustion, it's brain fog, it's the anxiety, it's all the addictions that we get addicted to in the coping mechanisms. And when you can go there and say, okay, you can be peaceful now, I've got you, and speak to that child that's afraid, that's running your life, then you can start to do that deep, fertile listening of saying, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, I've got you, you can be peaceful now. So it's really that inner work again for me that's so important, because we're literally speaking on a cellular level so that the issues that are hiding in your tissues can be identified and integrated back into you at the age you are now, and then transmuted into something else. So that for me, this is the trauma into truth-telling. Right? This is about having the truthful, honest conversations with that child. It's like, how would you treat a child that's just fallen down? Well, you wouldn't beat her up and say, oh, you're so stupid. Right. You'd be compassionate. You'd be kind. You'd be patient. You wouldn't rush them. You'd allow them to have their own somatic experience of, gosh, I hurt my knee when I fell down. But I'm okay. I can be okay with this because my body is going to heal. Does that make sense?
It totally does. It requires so much empathy for yourself that, you know, we're not used to having.
Well, we'll do it for everybody else. Yeah. Especially the women that I see in my practice are very highly sensitive to other people's energies. And that's why a lot of empaths or sensitives and healers, I see a lot of healers in my practice, because we're so good at giving, but we're not very good at receiving. And this is where we get the adrenal burnout, and we end up with the healing crises, because we're taking on things that are not ours to take on, and not staying in the space of allowance of letting that person have their own process. And I think that's the biggest key, certainly that I've experienced, because I never had it, was being able to hold space for someone that's in that waiting room or is going through some form of trauma, to say, I see you, and not stepping in and trying to fix anybody, saying, I honor your process and I'm here. Because sometimes we just need someone to listen, don't we? We're not asking you to come in and fix me, because you're not broken. You might be broken into a million tiny little pieces, but you're not broken. You're resilient, and you know what you know. Nobody else knows what you know. Right. So it opens up a whole nother dialogue to be able to be in the question of, what does this part of me need?
Yeah.
And what is underneath this fear that's holding me in this constant state of self-abuse and addiction patterns. So that Mobius strip that we feel like we can't get off, that often feels like exhaustion, rather than saying, oh, my body is actually asking me to have some deep rest. How can I have that without making myself wrong? Because I also see so many people in my practice that literally will create some kind of disease in their bodies. That's how powerful we are, in order to validate that they can take time off work.
Wow.
It's crazy, but that's how, we don't own that part of ourselves that's so powerful. And we're not talking to this innate intelligence of our physical bodies, which for me is like the horse. It's this magnificent, powerful being, because we're living from the rider being in control of the horse, rather than saying, hey, horse, trust. Your body is that horse that is constantly in out creation of how can I thrive under this healthy stress before it gets to be pathological. And stress is a great gift if we can see it as a gift. Healthy stress is how nature thrives. And yet we've forgotten how to be in harmony with nature, with the seasons, with the cycles of the moon. There's a time and a place for everything. And that's where I see so many people making themselves wrong, because they're like, I should be over this already.
Right.
Why? Oh, and then we go into judging our bodies, don't we? You would know about that. How could my body have let me down, that I've got a tumor in my head, or I've got breast cancer, rather than speaking to the parts that's saying, gosh, you spend too much time in your head. That's what that was my gift through that experience of, let's get you out of your head, because if you're stuck in your head, you're dead. Because thinking doesn't make you happy.
Right.
in the way, shape, and form that it's creating. And anything around the breasts, and this is like asking your body, what do you need from a place of kind, compassionate nurturing that you didn't get as a child.
Right.
And giving that to your body. Your body will show you the way, but we have to get this out of the way.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Very powerful. Another concept that you, which I find really fascinating about the work that you do, is this communicating with animals. So you've been doing that since your childhood, and you talk about what animals of the wild can teach us about healthy stress release. And that, I think that would be really great to hear more about.
Oh yeah, I get the goosies every time I think about it, because I was, like I said, the horses saved me from myself when I was being a victim, hiding in that mental hospital. They showed me how to be present. They're prey animals. So they're very in touch with their bodies, with the herd dynamic, that everybody plays their part, that it's not all on you. And they teach us how to be present. So if there's something to be afraid of, you see this in the wild. I work a lot with lions and elephants. And you see this when the plane is flat. So in other words, everything is flat until something moves. And then there's this beautiful morphogenetic resonance that the whole collective is turning now to look at the noise.
Right.
Is this something we need to be afraid of and run from?
Right. Or
is this just the wind blowing? And that's why you see them go back to grazing. They're so good at being present with what is, and we don't, because we taught to think our way out of problem solving.
Right.
Like, oh, let me give that person a second chance. When we're looking at healing from abuse and we're doing a lot of the forgiveness work, we're not saying that you need to forgive the behavior. We're saying you can forgive the perpetrator of that abuse. We're not saying that you need to be a doormat, that it's okay for that to happen. You don't see that in the wild. You see it as, in this moment I'm eating until I need to move.
Right.
And that's it. It's presence. It's the presencing of staying in the physical body.
Yeah.
When we have shock and trauma, all these virtual vibrational reality systems go off on this that primal part of our brain.
Yeah.
And instead of us staying there and having a visceral experience, Peter Levine talks a lot about this with somatic release of chasing the tiger.
Yeah.
Right? It's like when you see that you're perhaps frozen in a trauma, say you went in to have your tonsils taken out when you were 3 and you were promised jelly and nice cool ice cream after the operation, but nobody actually said to you what was going to happen in those events. And you're lying on this bed and all these white coats come in with scary masks on and put this thing over your face, and before you know it, you're out and you wake up with a sore throat, and your body's actually hasn't had that chance to decide, do I run away? Do I stay? So it gets frozen in the body. And it's amazing, because I remember as a child my mother saying when my younger sister was born, oh, you're so funny. All these doctors in the hospital were wanting to give you a surgeon's mask so you could play doctor. And I was literally having a terror panic attack on the floor of the hospital. So the smell of the hospitals in those days, they smelled like overcooked cabbage and funny smells and being sensitive. We pick up a lot of that energy of people that are dying, people are sick here, and you don't know what to do with all of that as a child.
Right.
So I had this suppressed trauma for years. I'd sit in a dentist chair and the tears, silent tears, the silent scream, tears would just start falling down my face. And I didn't know until I started doing this work that had connected back into the time when I was a couple of months old, and my mother said, yes, you had a blocked tear duct in your eye, and I took you to the doctor, and he took a big needle and he poked you in your tear duct while you were away. So the body's very good at hiding those kind of traumas, and then later on you wonder why you're afraid of needles or why you're terrified to go into hospitals.
Right.
Because that child part couldn't run away.
Right.
So that somatic shaking it off that you see when you start to, literally let your body shake it off in a healthy way and run away from the tiger or stay and fight. Yeah. That for me is one of the most pivotal parts in spontaneous healing. Wow. Is that we process it in the mind, but we don't allow our bodies to have their own experience of completion.
Right.
Because we're sitting in this prefrontal lobe, we're thinking our way and thinking, oh, I should be over this. And your body's saying, could you just slow down? So that's another one that I teach my clients, is to really slow down and stay with their bodies. And this is my trust process. It's saying, be with yourself in a place where the thoughts come up. You can hear what's going on in your peripheral. You can feel that you're okay, you're in your body, you're orienting to the room, you're safe here, you're not there. Yeah. And then as the thoughts arise to try and get you out of that peaceful state, you let them come up and you keep saying, it's okay, you can be peaceful with this. I'm holding it.
Very nice.
And then this beautiful thing happens. And this is what the animals have taught me. And why it's so amazingly quick sometimes at getting people to get to that level. And you see it with the animals when you hold that for them, and you see they start getting really sleepy and they start yawning and releasing and licking and chewing, and eventually they're like, oh, they can't keep their heads up because they just feel so blissed out. And eventually they go into what I call like a stage 4 healing, where they're not there, and you see them start to twitch off. They start shaking it off. They start twitching off trauma. They start moving their legs. And that's that deep theta state of healing on a cellular level. It's so powerful.
Wow. That must be amazing to see.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
So, this is a big question, but what's your biggest joy in the work that you do?
There's so much to it because I work with people and animals. And I think the joy is giving people the tools to be their own medicine. To literally say, you have the power. You are the authority of your own life. You get to choose how you want to live in this present moment to create your future.
Right.
You get to rewrite your story.
Right.
So, you know, for me, the biggest part of feeling so fulfilled is giving people back that space for them to love the parts of them that they were judging,
mm-hmm.
and to step into that remembering
mm-hmm.
that they have this ability innately within them to really fully engage in how they want to live, how they want to live deeply happy in their aliveness. You know, I think Joseph Campbell says that I don't believe so much that people are looking for the meaning of life,
mm-hmm.
as much as they're looking for the experience of being alive. And in my work, it's not about that, because most people I see are so busy protecting a life that they're not living, based on all the adverse childhood experience, based on all the experiences where they've been hurt and betrayed and really gone through massive amounts of trauma on a subtle level. And I really think it's making sense of, it's not so much about making sense of it. It's about how can I be present with what is in this moment,
mm-hmm.
and do a turnaround of seeing the gift in it, seeing the gift in depression, seeing the gift in, you know, somebody is saying something awful to you,
mm-hmm.
and knowing that collectively your piece is changing the whole.
Right.
You know, that it starts with one. It starts with one degree, one step, one nervous system, one person, one animal at a time.
mm-hmm.
But that it's bigger than all of us. It's bigger than all of us. And that's, I think, what people ultimately, I think, as a species, we have in common, is that we all just want better.
Yeah.
We want to live knowing that we've made a difference, that we matter. And what better place to start than doing your own inner work?
Absolutely. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of the wisdom that you have today. Now you have a free gift for our viewers. Can you just talk a little bit about what that is? And I'll put a link in below the video so people will go to your website.
Absolutely. So what I'm offering is people the invitation to get curious about ACEs, get curious about what did you forget about, what have you suppressed. So I'm offering people an opportunity to take the ACE test on my website. They'll find the link that you're going to post, because again, this is about taking responsibility for your life, to be your own medicine, to be your own authority, right? Instead of giving your power out to other people. And this is a great first step, because we do forget. I have so many people that come to me and go, I had a great childhood. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with my life. But there's an edginess to it and what they're not saying. And then they start, all this repressed memory starts to surface. And it's just like, gosh, yes, now I remember. Now I remember this happened to me. So if they take the ACE test, they'll find out how high their ACEs are. And then they're going to get a sort of introductory ebook that's going to show you what some of the steps that we've talked about today, of how can I start to take back accountability and responsibility for my life.
That's great.
Yeah, and if they want to go further with that, then obviously I would love to have a conversation with them about how I can support them in turning their trauma back into truth-telling, and looking at some of the blind spots and some of the ways that they're maybe self-sabotaging, and get them back on track.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you again for your time. It was lovely to talk to you all the way from South Africa. Just I encourage everybody to click on the links below the video and check out Sarah Jane's website. There's lots of great information, and the blog is great. So thank you everybody for your time.